Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Craft of the Draft Podcast. Another week of Talent League done and dusted. And as usual, I'm one of your co-hosts, Nathan Seppi, joined by my other co-host, Jonty Ralph Smith. Jonty, a lot of boys this week to recap. How was your weekend of footy?
Yeah, really good. Between us, we saw all bar one of the matches, so we'll be able to give really detailed overviews. And I guess we'll start with the Oakley-Eastern game. We were both at this one, and Eastern ultimately too good for Oakley. Oakley probably couldn't make good of the win the same way that the Rangers were able to, and probably just had a few more contributors across the board. But a couple of players that really stood out from my end was Christian Moraes, coming off a 43 disposal game, was able to back that up, showed his burst away. And I think if you look past his size, I think he's a real prospect for Eastern next year. To think they're going to have him, Josh Smiley, who got injured during the game, and also hard nut Cody Anderson in that midfield is really exciting. Cody Anderson went all right. Tyson Schrook had a run through the midfield, and I really liked Caleb Windsor's game, 23 and a goal, so carrying on that championships form. There were some that impressed, and Cooper Trembath down back. His intercepting game is back, so 17 marks in the last 2 weeks, and a lot of those have been sort of contested and intercepts.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll list off some of the Oakley boys that played well. Jagger Smith, Tom Gross, two of the bottom majors. I mean, they've been phenomenal, and they are lifting this Oakley team at the moment. Kynan Brown with 30 touches. Pretty dominant performance from him, 10 tackles, which was quite impressive, and it probably wasn't really noticeable until afterwards. We sort of said, geez, he didn't know he had that many. One I think worth talking about, Riley Weatherall from the Eastern Rangers, who his champs only got to play, he played the one game in the end,
yeah.
Then didn't have a lot of impact, and has to have a pretty big end to the season for Eastern, probably to give himself the best shot. Did he do enough? That's my question to you, and there's this conversation. He got his hands on the footy when he needed to, took a few good contested marks and hit the scoreboard, was a little inaccurate. I think he was 2-3, something around that mark. So he was there and thereabouts. What was your reflection of his performance?
Yeah, well, I think everything I've heard is he needs to be taking those contested marks, and people want to see him be a bit more assertive overhead, be a bit more aggressive, and be that man that can be the target up forward in the last month or so of the season if he's gonna get drafted. And I think he did that enough. He's obviously coming off a 4-goal performance as well, so he's getting those scoring shots consistently, or he has done in the last fortnight. So just be about carrying that on, I guess. He would have liked to convert, because obviously he would have had 6 or 7 marks. A 6 or 7 mark game and 4-goal game looks a lot better than 6 marks and 2-2. So yeah, but no, I it's as well as I've seen him play. I will say that, having not seen the 4-goal game last week. So
yeah, well, it was pretty. Yeah, it was good. Good performance to maintain sort of where he's at, and it was impressive. But yeah, it was pretty. Eastern really, Oakley got in front. Actually, they were in front by about 4 goals in that first quarter. Took the advantage, and then Eastern pretty much got a run on from there. I think they kicked 7 unanswered, and it was pretty much on Eastern's terms for the rest of it. I'm interested to see how Oakley go for the rest of the season. They've got a base there. It's probably just after your top 6 or 7. It's what's left and how can they stand up. So be interesting to see how Oakley go for the rest of the year, and Eastern, good performance to build on. They've been very hit or miss this year. We'll move to Northern GWV. Northern 9-2-56, GWV 13-18-96. So 11-31 scoring shots. Probably tells the story in the end, and the Rebels just got a big hand on it. They won the contested footy, and it was Northern were up by, I think, a point as well in the third quarter. So they actually got ahead, and then Rebels stormed home in that last quarter. From a Northern perspective, Christian Ferronato is continuing his consistency with 35 touches, 7 tackles, and 7 inside 50s. And it's a matter of now just working on his transition and his movement going inside 50. So it was another impressive performance. It's just keeping his name on the map. Nate Caddy, 4 goals, the slowest start, but works himself into it. We know how impressive he can be. Zach Johnson, bottom major. We know how good he's been in recent weeks. He'll be really impressive to watch and exciting to watch. 28 touches, 4 inside 50s and 6 rebound 50s. From a Rebels performance, it's starting to click at the right time for a lot of these boys. Harry Lawson, defender, it's one of his first couple of games, but he's finding his feet now. 10 rebound 50s was probably his best game of the year. Kai Jess around the middle of the ground was really impressive. 21 touches, 9 tackles, and 5 inside 50s. George Stevens doing the usual in the middle. Reece Unwin and Jonty Fall up forward have just really hit this. Like they're going full on now, and they've hit a really good patch of form. Recently with 4 goals. He's kicked 2, 3, and 4 goals in the last 3 weeks, and the last 2 weeks against Geelong and Northern, the week before against Murray.
And really positive from a GWV perspective that they're not relying on Lachie Charlson to hit the scoreboard in order to be competitive. We know that he is that damaging small forward who can go into the midfield, but they are getting other sources to go.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of Lachie Charlson, his brother Harry Charlson and Ollie Hannaford, they were great as running backs in the end for the Rebels, and it's, again, just hitting a really good patch of form. And they actually sit now, the Rebels, they sit from memory in second in the country conference and third in total. So they're in, we don't know what final series it will be now, but if it was the full final series like normal, they'd be straight in a final spot. So very good patch of form. Another game of mine, Gippsland 16-12, 108 defeated Bendigo 6-6, 42. It was all it was all Gippsland for most of the day. It was the Zane Dersma show really with 6 goals. He played it on Dan Ureta, which we've heard a little bit about, and Dan just couldn't get that front position on him, and took 3 contested marks in the end, Dersma, and kicked all of those goals, and a few from free kicks, but it was just a dominant performance. What I'd like to talk about, and we saw a little bit of him against the Rebels, I think a couple months back, was Ricky Mentha. He's a bottom major. He played in the NT Academy at the start of the year, and now he's moved down to Vic, and he's playing for the Power. He was just really impressive. I thought it was his impact per possession. He had 7 touches, but he kicked 3 goals and 2 inside 50. So that's 5 out of 7 touches did something in the end in terms of effectiveness. And he was just really fun to watch, just really good flair around the stoppage. He has that bounce on him that any small forward you'd love to see. And I think he kicked 2 goals from just great snaps and got the crowd up and going. He was fantastic to watch. Xavier Lindsay, really impressive, 28 touches. Willem Dersma, it's his second game at Talent League level now, and it was fun to watch him at that level, and he seemed like he fit in perfectly, to be quite honest. It was like he just translated that form straight in. He had a really good rundown tackle to win holding the ball. Really good intercept marking. Didn't have a heap of it, but when he got around the footy, he was pretty effective with it. And then Lockie Smith, the last Skippy boy I want to talk about, he was really dominant in the ruck. Really good run and carry for a ruckman. That's something I've noticed with his game. He'll get it and he's composed. He's not get it, kick it, and look forward. He was just really good. And there was a passage in the last quarter where he burst along the pocket of the inside 50 and laced it out to a forward on is that a 45-degree angle? Pretty much like a tough kick that a ruckman should never be kicking. So he's impressive.
And I know that's something that the Gippy Power have been really high on. They think that his ability to become that extra midfielder when the ball is in general play is something that gives him a real point of difference. We've seen him in ruck contests in recent weeks against the likes of Will Green, and he's come up as the player who's gone better just from a tap point of view, but also the ability to get it done around the ground and his combativeness and his ability to play his size and really assert himself with that physicality that he has. We know how big he is, has been an area that they've been really pleased to see. So, it's good to see him continuing on that form. And I guess another one, Will Dawson down back, just continuing on the Vic Country form with his read of the play. So they were also very pleased with how he went. And Job Scape, and the Bartram medalist from Vic Country, making his debut. Didn't get a whole lot of game time, played on the wing. But, good to see him in action, and no doubt he'll be better for the run. From a Bendigo perspective, a difficult day for them, but who were the ones that stood out? You were obviously at Shepley.
Yeah, it was a bit of a difficult day for Bendigo. They just couldn't get things on their terms. Oscar Smart was pretty good in the end. It was, his usual tackling pressure that was lifting him. But it was a few of his kicks into the corridor and those switch kicks that I thought were really impressive. Probably an element of his game that hasn't been on show as much. And I thought they were just little good moments. And then Ollie Poole, he was effective in the end, 2 goals and 19 touches, 3 inside 50s. He was just good in transition. But a tougher day for Bendigo. And probably the last one that I've blanked with that I talked about in the first quarter, that kicked 2 goals. It's blanked my mind. But forward, Charlie
Hillier.
Charlie Hillier, yes, sorry. He did kick 2 goals in the first quarter. He was pretty lively. Shame he probably didn't continue that into the last 3 quarters, but there was a bit of a spark there from him, and he was really effective going inside 50. He was really tough at the contest and kicked really 2 fantastic goals. So that was that was the recap from that game.
See what comes of Charlie Hillier. There was a little bit of talk about him in pre-season, and it was a game I was down at, a pracky game that Bendigo played in Essendon, and it was the last 30 seconds of that game where he did his ankle, and that stalled his start to the season. Hasn't obviously been able to get the continuity, but yeah, interesting to see if he persists with it, and hopefully does become one, because he does look like he could become a good state league footballer if he wants to make the move down to Melbourne at the very least. We'll move on to the Western and Geelong game though, and Geelong blitzed this one. They were far too good for Western. 17-14, 116 to Western 9-9-63. Somehow that doesn't even feel like it does justice to how supreme Geelong were on the day, and it was the Michael Rudd show, I guess you could say. 23 disposals, 10 marks, and 2 goals 2 for the Geelong Falcons skipper. 2 goals 2. It felt like he kicked a bit more than that. He was taking marks for fun up forward and was an absolute nightmare for the Western defenders. They had no way of stopping him, and the delivery was pretty good. Mel White was one in the midfield who really stood out for me. He was really clean and able to make composed decisions when he had the footy. And Tobin Murray, we know how good he's been on a wing, and his work rate's really impressive. He got to go as an inside midfielder, and that work rate shone through again. He was able to have plenty of the footy. Pat Hughes played inside 50, kicked 3 goals 3, and his marking as well was something that came to the fore. But the player who probably had a breakout game more than anyone, as much as those players were all strong, we know what they can do from their form throughout the season. Zakiah Davey, though, is one who we haven't seen as much of, and his 3 goals, 15 disposals, and 8 marks were a real point of difference for Geelong up forward. A medium forward, a smart forward who doesn't necessarily have the athletic profile of some others, doesn't have the height, but he does have the footy IQ, gets himself into really dangerous spots. So I was really impressed with what I saw from him. From a Western perspective, it was a difficult day, but I think it was just your normal players that stood out, being Logan Morris and Jake Smith. Jake Smith, particularly in the first quarter when Western was probably most competitive, he was the one who was really turbocharging that from the midfield. He probably had half his touches in that first quarter. So it's probably for him a matter of getting the ball on his boot a little bit more, because he's their best ball user in the team, just wasn't able to necessarily get it on his boot as much. And Logan Morris, 10 disposals and 3 goals, 1. Anytime Western go forward, it feels like he needs to be involved if they're going to score a goal. He's so important to what they do up there. But yeah, difficult little period for Western. They've had a poor couple of weeks, but some green shoots in that Tom Burton is expected to play at least one of the last 2 games. Obviously, we saw what he could do in the under-16s. He impressed both of us at Trevor Barker Oval. So hopefully he can come in and get a good run. But yeah, not going to plan to end the season for the Western Jets. And Lockie MacArthur, I guess, another one who went all right after taking 10 marks previous week. And I'm told he's getting a little bit of draft interest, which is good from a Jets perspective to have someone else there or thereabouts in that range. He'll be looking to finish off the season strongly after some strong school footy for Pegs. But we'll move on to a much more enthralling game, this one. Murray, 11-9-75 to Calder, 10-14-74. Nathan, this was at Wangaratta. You watched it. Tell us about the game and how were Murray able to win that?
Yeah, well, enthralling it was. Like, come the last quarter, it was just a very intense game to watch, but it didn't ever feel intense until the last couple of minutes. Calder on top, I would have to say at least 80%. That's probably a fair percentage in the end, and they were up for at least. They always had that 3 or 4 goal buffer, but it was a comfortable 3 or 4 goal buffer, and it was never really being chipped away at. And then in the last quarter, Murray, I think they were down by as much as 5 goals at one point. They just kept kicking, like just enough to keep them in it, and felt like it was behind in terms of each team going down their end and missing. Then there was an injury to Calder where there was a stretcher involved, which best wishes to that player. And I feel like that did turn the momentum a bit. And from a viewer perspective, I had no idea how much time was left, because obviously if you watch on the stream, the clock keeps ticking up, but the actual clock at the ground stops for an injury. And then it was Darcy Wilson who kicked a goal to put him down by 5 points with, I think it's hard to say how long there was left because I wasn't too sure, but it was around 90 seconds left. Then Murray just got it forward, and Jesse Hart on the siren. So it wasn't the siren went and he kicked it. It was he kicked it from. It was a big kick, 50 metres. If you haven't seen the footage, it is out there on baseline. It's a massive kick, and the siren goes as the ball goes through. Murray got up by a point. So it was, colder. That it is a bit of an issue now. Like, they have surrendered a few big leads. We saw it against Sandy a couple of weeks ago, where they're up by around 29 and weren't able to hold that on. So it's an issue they've got time to fix before the end of the season. But from a Calder perspective, Croft and Kako, 3 goals for Croft, pretty impressive. And he did really well on Connor O'Sullivan in that first half, caused him a lot of issues, just got front position really well. And that was what enabled him to get his hands on the footy. And Kako was just as electric as he could be. 4 really good goals as well from deep in the pocket. On one on the halftime siren, just shot a really nice kick from a really tight angle. And he was really impressive. Probably one of the best games he's played all year. One of your favourites, Hugo Garcia, played a pretty good game in the end. 25 touches, 4 inside 50s, and got on the scoreboard twice. Was just really strong in the contest inside 50, was able to break out of the tackles. And then Damien Hollow, 21 touches. He's been continuing his good form, 7 inside 50s and 2 rebound 50s. Really good burst out of the centre stoppages, and his speed through the corridor was something that stood out. From a Murray perspective, one of my favourites to watch, Darcy Wilson, was good as usual, 35 touches and a goal, and probably did a bit too much with it at some times, actually, which I thought stood out. That was just a bit of a negative of his game, but he was usually 90% on good as he usually is. And then Kobe James through the middle, 23 touches, and he got on the scoreboard in the end. He just generates that run and carry through the middle. He's such a reliable runner to move you in transition. I mean, Connor O'Sullivan, like I said, he had a really tough first half. He just couldn't get that front position on Jordan Croft. But then in the second half, sort of changed a bit and moved around, got front position, and he was really good, taking a few intercept marks, 5 rebound 50s. And then Jesse Hart, like I said, that winning goal, you have to mention that. So a big win for Murray. It's just good to get a win towards the end of the season and build on something, because every team makes finals, but you don't want to go in with not a lot of confidence. And before we move to the next bit, I'll just quickly run through the ladder. As I sort of mentioned, we don't really know what the finals will look like now. It could be the same, it could be different. There has
been rumours of different structures and that sort of thing that we have caught wind of in the last week or so. So we're not exactly sure where that sits, but go through it.
Yeah. I'll go through just the full ladder, and we'll leave the Metro Country ones. But Sandy on top with 36, Tassie, Rebels and Northern with 32, Calder, Geelong, Eastern on 28, Gippsland on 24, Bendigo, Dandenong on 20, Western on 16, and Oakley and Murray on 12. So it's a predominant country ladder, actually. When you look at the two conferences, the country teams are doing much better. So it's interesting to see. But now I'll let you lead this one. The 2023 National Combine list came out. So you've got your national list and then the state list, which will obviously continue to be built on towards the end of the season. But I'll let you lead this. A few of the names, who was mentioned, who wasn't mentioned, who was mentioned in state that wasn't national, and we'll generate some discussion out of this.
Yeah, for sure. I think the big one on everyone's lips has been that Will Brown, who was probably seen as a first-round prospect as recently as about a month, 6 weeks ago, has only received a state combine invite. And I guess it is important to say that, it's probably the combine invites are important more so because they're indicative of the interest they're receiving than what they actually get. Whether you state combine, national combine, the only difference is obviously the 2K time trial that the national combine invitees get to run. But it was very interesting to see that. We know his championships weren't probably at the level that we know he can produce. However, he was injured with the ankles that he was carrying. And he is one of very few inside mids in this draft class in terms of really big-bodied inside mids, that 195 centimetre type who can also play a really strong role off half forward. So I'm really surprised to see him only in state. And I think if he does fall, then whoever gets him is getting a bargain.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's interesting. His champs were obviously, they were hurt by his ankle injury. I feel like he didn't really get to stand out. Probably he had a pretty good last game, but it just wasn't probably what it was going to be built up to be for Will Brown. Cam Nyko's one who made it into the national one, which when you compare the two we've just talked about, you'd probably switch it around. The champs for Nico just probably weren't. We didn't really see what he's done at talent league level, so it's a very interesting selection. So there's obviously still interest.
Yeah, no. Yeah, certainly, and it's good for him. I guess that selection is probably one where he can sort of hold his hat on having the credits in the bank and what he produced last season as holding a lot of credibility. And we know how tough he is over the footy, but he probably hasn't shown it this season at Talent League or Champs level. But people are still satisfied with what they've seen and what they've seen over a longer period of time. I'll go from a Gippsland point of view now. Lockie Smith, I touched on before, so I won't repeat what I said, but I think the Power were quite surprised based on how he has performed against some better quality ruckman, based in the opinions of recruiters, that Lockie Smith wasn't invited to the combine, and he's one that can certainly work into that. But Will Dawson does get the invite, and the interest has come directly off the back of his form playing as that defender, and we know he doesn't have much experience there, so kudos to him. True Jack also won a little bit of a surprise nomination to get invited to the combine from Gippsland as well. The brother of Chunkworth Jack at Hawthorn. So they're the Gippsland boys. I guess Billy Wilson was one who surprised as well. If we're talking about players who were not invited to national, only state, and he's again probably an example of not showing his best form at the national championships. So he didn't necessarily have the credits in the bank, didn't have the strong performances last year, unlike Nico, and had the really strong talent league form, but then wasn't able to carry that through when it mattered most.
Yeah. Well, it's still good to see him in that state positions. It'll be good. We'll talk on a couple of Sandy boys now. Vigo Vicentini, great to see him. He's one that we've loved watching. Matt Carroll had a really impressive champs. That's one that definitely has reaped the rewards of his impressive performances. Tarkin O'Leary, very good to see. That is very good.
Yeah, surprising based on, I thought, the size element might have hurt him, and we saw him play a very, very good game for Sandringham Zebras on the weekend, making his AFL kicked a really impressive goal, which got a lot of airtime on social media. So all the best to him, and good to see him invited. And Luke Lloyd, the other one, so the dark horse, and we put him on the map last week by saying he was thereabouts in the top 20 Victorian/Tasmanian prospects. If you haven't watched that video, go to the YouTube channel and give it a watch and give us your thoughts as well. But Luke Lloyd almost made it into my top 20, and gets rewarded for really strong form in the last 6 or 8 weeks since he's been back from that injury that did hamper his start to the season. So good to see him there. Caleb Windsor gets rewarded for the strong championships, and so does James Leake. Heath Ollington invited to the state combine. Ari Schonmaker invited to the national combine. So good to see lots of Tasmanians around it, as well as obviously the big three, Jack Cullen and Colby McKercher and Riley Sanders from down south. And they're probably the main names to talk about. If there was maybe another one to mention that we've both liked watching, is probably Moody Taha. I expected him to get invited. He's got good lateral movement, applies good pressure, and probably just haven't seen enough of that outside game and him going forward and hitting the scoreboard perhaps, but he is tearing it up at the moment for Calder. I think he got 37 possessions last week. So we have enjoyed watching him, and be interesting to see what comes.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, he's an electric player to watch. It's just, can he give that extra bit more? And he gets his hands on the footy. It's what's next. Can he provide an extra element to his game, which is still time to work on? But he should definitely get state recognition, I'd hope. I'd be pretty surprised if he doesn't. So interesting to see.
I reckon he'll work his way into that as well. And like we say, and maybe we've touched about in a roundabout way, that these players can still work their way into the state combine and national combine lists. It's dependent now on their form in the last part of the season. This is just a preliminary list. All those players will get invited, but there will be some more that will be added. But now I'll move on to a little bit of girls footy. The Tassie Devils had a couple of players represent really well in a difficult loss for the Allies to Queensland. The Allies went down 4-1-25 to Queensland 15-7-97. Queensland won each of the 4 quarters, with the Allies only able to put a goal on the board in each quarter. And Mackenzie Williams was one who was perhaps most impressive on the day for the Allies. She's a key defender out of the Apple Isle, and she performed really well under duress. Like we say, Queensland had most of the running, but her decision-making and understanding of that role is something that really impressed people who watched the game, and the ability to shut down, come off, help out her opponent, but then also had some really good moments where she was able to take intercept marks and showed her strength overhead. Took 4 marks for the day, which doesn't necessarily jump off the page, but it was a team high 4 marks, and 16 disposals as well, which probably tells you how much the ball was living down there. She's averaging 19 disposals, 5 marks, and 4 rebound 50s for the Devils through the Talent League season. It's been a really consistent season for her. Those are all team high numbers for the Devils, and she also got lots of exposure last year. So probably one that we haven't touched on as much as we could have from a Tassie Devils point of view, but she does often shut down opposition forwards and does it really well. And she's got that offensive flair to her game, which she showed on the weekend. So good to see her going well. And Candice Balbin is one that we have enjoyed watching on this podcast. She stood up to body contact, burst through tackles, 5 clearances, 9 tackles, 3 inside 50s. Usual productivity from her. Her work rate stood out. So yeah, good to see a couple of those girls stand out despite the difficult day it was for the Allies. And this week, the National Championships match to watch is the Vic Metro versus Vic Country game, and that's going to be at Trevor Barker Oval. And we'll run through a few of the players we're looking forward to watching there. I'll throw to you, Nathan. Maybe if you want to start with a couple of Vic Country girls you're looking forward to watching.
Vic Metro, you said, right?
Vic
Country.
Country.
Yeah. I'll start with. Okay, I'll start with Country, but yeah, we'll go from the top here. But Ali Simmons, one you've loved watching, actually. Dandenong prospect 06 born. She's been great in the ruck, but she's just electric. She gets the ball and she's able to provide that run and carry. Tyler Crabtree had a very good game against Queensland, and it will be interesting to see if she can build on that. They'll have a lot of eyes on this game, I can only assume, being the big Vic game. Amber Shute, she was pretty impressive in that Queensland game as well. She provided some really nice run along the wings as well. And then Chantal Mason, I think this is a game. I mean, this is the game for her. She needs to have a big one. I feel like she had her moments against Queensland, but it just wasn't. It never really happened. Lila Keck, we know the energy she provides inside forward 50s, that small forward, but she can go into the midfield rotation. So interesting to see if they will make that change.
I feel like she was another one a little bit like Chantal Mason that probably had those almost moments.
Yeah.
Scoreboard in that last game that Vic Country played, but yeah, wasn't quite able to put it all together. And Meg Robertson, one who we've seen how consistent she's been. Dandenong didn't necessarily show her traits as well as she would have liked in that last Vic Country game. So we'll be looking to bounce back, and her teammate Michaela Williamson has been one who's been strong and did the traits in that last game. So she'll be looking to carry that form on, Michaela Williamson. And we'll move on to some players from Vic Metro now. Laura Stones had a pretty strong carnival, so the Eastern Rangers defender will be hoping to carry that form on. Ava Campbell as well will be looking to probably have that statement performance. We've seen bits and parts from her, but she hasn't necessarily really stamped her authority on a game as that rebounding defender. She'll be looking to do that. Gemma Rigoni, we know how much speed she's got. She'll be looking to carry that form forward. Kaylee Kavanagh in the midfield has all aspects of the game covered, and we know how well she's able to cover the ground, get contest to contest, and get her hands on the footy. And Emma McDonald probably is the key forward from Oakley. Will she get another opportunity? Obviously, bottom major, and played really well in that first game for Vic Metro. So interesting to see if they give her another run. Nath, maybe if you want to run through a few of the Sandy girls, who I know you're very well across, who certainly impressed in some of those first couple of matches. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can just back it up and make it a strong carnival rather than just a strong match or a strong couple of matches.
Well, it is the home game type champs game for them in terms of playing at Trevor Barker, so a bit of familiarity. Emily Goff is one that she came to the champs in such top form, and I think she's continued that. She usually plays her role on the wing, but she did get moved to the half-back role in attempt to see if she would be able to hold that position in the Metro side, and she has done that really well, and she performed really well, especially up in Queensland against the Allies. Against South Australia, a lot of them struggled. It was a pretty tough. South Aussies are just stacked. That was unbelievable to watch them play. And then Isabel Bacon is the other one that I think has gone really underrated in this championship so far. She's performed extremely well, just uses the ball really well and gets around the contest and moves really nicely. Doesn't overdo it with her ball usage, but uses it really nicely. So yeah, she's been one that two of them that I think have been really fun to watch. This is the last game for Metro as well. Country played WA one more time, but I think both are. I don't think either can win it unless I think SA won all their games. So this is for state pride now. So
yeah, certainly. But
who's your tip?
What's that? My tip will be Metro. I think they're just deeper across the board. I think they'll just prove too talented, but hopefully Country can put up a good fight.
Yeah, I probably have to agree, but I think it'll be interesting. It's always it's got a bit in it, these type of games. So be interesting to see how it goes.
That's the main game this weekend. There is no boys currently. They take a week off before their last couple of rounds, and then we get into finals. As we know, what that system looks like is still up in the air. The girls will be back from a talent league perspective in a couple of weeks as well after this game. But that'll just about do us for this episode.
Yeah.
So if you haven't checked us out on Instagram, then check us out because we've got lots of interesting content floating around. We've got lots of video features and lots of other things as well. Check us out on Twitter. Check us out on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. After the Draft, COTD. Thanks for tuning in. And for now, that's all we've got time for.